I'm going to show you how to build the QQ190 Falcon frame. That's by QuadQuestions.com, and it has been graciously provided by 2DogRC. Thank you, 2DogRC. This build it's not an obvious build, how it goes together. And I say that because when I first got the copter, I didn't have the manual, the installation manual. You can't just download the manual from the website because QuadQuestions is concerned about, I don't know, people copying the frame, or I'm not sure exactly why. So you have to have bought the frame, and then you give them your email address or something, or you give them your order. I don't know exactly how it works. But so I didn't have the build manual, and I said, well, how hard could it be? And I went to put it together, and I subsequently got a hold of the manual. Again, thank you to DogRC for helping me with that. And I realized there were several things I had done wrong, and so definitely recommend that you get the manual or watch this video. For those of you who don't own this frame, I hope that this will give you just a perspective on how it goes together and what it's like if you're thinking about maybe buying it. So let's go ahead and get started. We've got the bottom plate, of course, which is a single piece bottom plate, and we're actually going to set that aside, and we're going to build the camera pod first. Now you'll notice that I already have in my camera pod side plates these captive screws, okay? And I suggest that you put them in before you start building because they're kind of hard to get in. For one thing, the screws need to go in with the absolutely straight. So the side of the screw has to be parallel here. If it's crooked, it'll be too wide and it won't go in. And even then, they're pretty snug. You can see that these are easily being retained. And this one is the only one that fell out and just didn't stay right in there. So if I push it in, yeah. So this is the only one that's even remotely loose. The rest of them are staying. So I would suggest go ahead and putting those in. If you want to wait until the camera pod is already together, that's fine too. It's awfully convenient to be able to kind of set it on a table flat and then get the screw in, and then you can push on the table to push it in and get it lined up straight so that when you go to screw it all together, it's all perfect and easily done. On the other hand, if your screws are a little looser, it may be not worth doing until you've got it all together. So it's your call. The camera pod is not complicated to construct. There are 25 millimeter and 29 millimeter standoffs. You see, the 29 millimeter standoffs are the ones that you use for the camera pod, the wide ones. The smaller standoffs are used as vertical standoffs on the frame. And there are 8 millimeter and 10 millimeter screws. The 8 millimeter screws are going to be used for the camera pod, so we're going to set the 10 millimeter screws aside. They've got a very clever way of mounting the camera. I'm actually really impressed with this. You may have seen in my FPV model X210 review that I didn't like the fact that it was a little loose. The camera was a little loose in the side plate. And of course the first thing I did to check was see if that was also true for this one. And again, I was a little disappointed that it was a little loose. But wait, they've done something very clever. These are 1.5 millimeter head screws, hex head or Allen head screws, and they fit perfectly in this little hole. So they're going to screw into the camera and provide a pivoting surface for the camera. And they actually give you several washers, which the manual asks you to install on the screws. And the reason for that is that if you're not careful, these screws will go so far into the camera that they may damage the board. So that was one of the mistakes I made when I put this together the first time. Was I was just like, oh, isn't that clever? I mean, I figured it out myself, but then I didn't know what the washers were for. So I'm going to go ahead and install this. Okay. So now we're going to take the two camera plates. Okay. And I'm just going to start putting the standoffs. And again, we're using the larger 29 millimeter standoffs and the smaller 8 millimeter screws to begin this assembly. Okay, so 2 standoffs go at the top, and then based on that you can put your camera in. Make sure you put your camera in right side up. Easy mistake to make. Okay, so here we've got our first little quirk, if you will, and that is that I've installed all the washers per the instructions in the manual, but you can see that when I put the side plates together, they're too far apart, and I can't really install the screws to close that up. So I think we're going to need to do this sort of to fit, and we may need to just not put the screw all the way in manually as opposed to using the washers. Let's try just one washer. Well, I mean, I guess I'm not sure the washers really matter. We definitely want to try to observe the spacing there. So let's just put them in. Let's put them not all the way in, just enough that we're sure to have the threads grabbing securely. And then we'll try to assemble this like so. That's much better. Okay, that's pretty good. And then the next thing I'm going to do, and you can see here that we've got a little bit of room. We could maybe put one. We could have maybe put one washer on. I'm going to go ahead and turn these in just a little more until they're both definitely flush. Okay. I think that'll be okay. I don't think I'm worried about the screws backing out because the plastic of the camera grips them pretty tightly. It's almost like its own built-in nylock mechanism. And the camera can slide back and forth a little bit. So it might have been better if I had used maybe one of the washers instead of 3 just to take up some of that slack. But once we get the camera secured in place, I don't think it's going to move. So I think we're going to be okay there. There are 2 more of these standoffs, and they go in this slit here, like so, and they're used to hold the camera at whatever angle you desire. The frame can hold the camera anywhere from 20 degrees down tilt to 30 degrees up tilt. I'm not going to tighten these down all the way. I'm just going to put the screws in enough that the spacer, the standoff, holds in place. Once you've got those standoffs installed loosely, you can see how they will move with the camera as you change the angle. And I'll show you from the back here. You can see they slide with the camera. So you can set the camera at your desired up tilt angle. So for me, that's going to be all the way up 30 degrees. And you can tighten them down. Okay. And now the camera pod is assembled. So now we're going to put the base plate on, and I'm going to put the captive screws in. I've got just one more to do, the others are already in. And then I'm going to set the base plate on. The base plate appears to be symmetrical, so I don't think you need to worry about which way is up or down. And then I'm going to use the 10mm screws. The 10mm screws go into the bottom of the camera pod. If your captive nuts are not directly centered, there will be some resistance here. I think you're just going to have to deal with that because getting the captive nuts exactly centered is going to be pretty tricky. Hopefully when you tighten everything down they will come to. And you'll notice that because I've used the 10mm screws here, they do go up all the way through the captive nuts. And the captive nuts are nylock, so they'll grab those threads and the threads won't work back out. So we have full engagement of the screw with the nylock nut. Okay, the camera pod is assembled. Next we're going to go to the base plate. We're going to install the 25mm standoffs. These 4 holes are for your flight controller. These 4 holes are going to be for your standoffs. The manual shows this as a 3mm carbon fiber plate. The one I have is actually 4mm. The frame was recently upgraded to 4mm. I don't have any more details about that. I just know that Two Dog was going to send me the frame, and he said, well, hold on, I don't want to send you the 3mm one. Let me send you the 4mm one once I get it in the warehouse. So I think they've recently upgraded it. I don't know if that's going to be a standard upgrade or if that's going to be something you pay a little extra for. I really don't know anything about that. But I think if I were to get this frame, I would definitely want the 4mm bottom plate. These frames don't have any. There's no boxing. There's no boxing in of anything. There's no rigidity except the rigidity of the plate itself. So I think you definitely want that extra millimeters worth of rigidity, especially if you're going to do a high-powered setup. You can see even with 4mm, you know, I mean, it's good carbon, but it'll still flex a little. So I would definitely want 4mm over 3, given the choice. All right, well, this is the part of the build where you would install all of your electronics and your motor, your flight controller, etc. I'm not going to do that in this video because this video is focused on the build out of the frame itself. The next step is to install the camera plate on top. We have 4 8mm screws that we can use to do that. Okay, there you go. For the battery strap, the recommended approach there's 2 slits here you can see. So the recommended approach is to go up and then down again. So the battery strap passes underneath the bottom and doesn't interact with your electronics at all. I think that's really smart. Sometimes some other frames might have the battery strap passing underneath the electronics and just across the main part of the frame. This is really well retained. Very, very smart, I think. Very smart. Now there's one more thing to build here, and that is this battery plate. It's a landing plate basically. And the idea is that it will strap on underneath your battery, and that way when you land on a hard surface like concrete or asphalt, your battery won't take the hit. And this is a really clever idea. Very smart. It's just a piece of carbon here with some 3D printed feet. So if you need to, you can, if you know somebody with a 3D printer, they can print you up some extra feet if these get scuffed up. I will say I'm not entirely thrilled with how it actually goes together in practice. The screws don't really seem to want to go into the feet straight, and it's kind of hard. You can see I've got a little bit of a gap here. It's hard to get the screw to go into the foot flush. With the foot flush, the screw kind of pushes the foot away because the screw isn't going in very straight. And then I thought, well, I'll just keep turning the screw and kind of close up that gap. But what happened was that the top of the screw broke right off. And that's because the carbon fiber was grabbing the threads so tightly that it had no choice but to tear the top of the screw off. So this is a very clever idea, but it's, I think, a little poorly executed. If you look at, I'm not sure how well you'll see this, I'll do my best. If you look at the screw holes here, you can see that this carbon fiber slit is like exactly wide enough to fit these feet. And unfortunately, that means if your screws don't go in exactly straight at the very outside edge, then you're just out of luck and it's going to break. So it's a good idea, but I think it's a little poorly executed. I'd like, instead of these slits, I'd really rather have some holes. And of course, if you are a clever person and an ambitious person, you can, of course, great. You can, of course, make the holes yourself in the carbon fiber, but I didn't, and so I think, yeah, I think that's not the best. Yeah, so you can see it kind of starts going in here, but it tends to slide a little bit, so it ends up not going in straight and not fitting as well as it should. And I can only guess, I'm not sure why these are slits here instead of holes, which the screw, of course, would go straight through. I can only guess that maybe the 3D printing is not quite precise enough that the screw holes on the feet come out exactly right. I just don't know why you would do it this way. So let's see if this one does any better than the first one. We'll see. I'm going to try to hold it flush while I push in or screw in the screws so it doesn't get pushed away. Yeah, see, you see, despite my best efforts, I've got a gap there. And there's really nothing I can do to fix that except unscrew the screw and try again. But it's kind of a pain in the ass. It'd be nice if there was a hole that was just big enough that the screw would slip in, and then you could just screw it in, screw it down, and be perfect. So there may be a good reason why they did it the way they did it, but for the time being, the rest of the frame is so precisely and nicely put together and fit up that this really strikes me as a little bit of a sloppy afterthought. It's clear that the people who designed this frame are capable of doing very, very good design work, and this does not seem up to the standards of the rest of the frame. So that's unfortunate, but what can you do? The other thing that I want to comment on is that there isn't anywhere obvious to mount your video transmitter on this frame. Some similar frames on the market will have a hole cut in the side plate and the video transmitter fits in sideways, or a hole cut here, like on the camera plate, the base of the camera pod, and the video transmitter will fit like this. This one doesn't have that. The pictures on the website show the video transmitter mounted underneath one of the legs with the antenna sticking off here, and that to me seems like a really bad idea. It seems like a surefire way to destroy your video transmitter or your antenna, right? This is an addition that I believe is going to be included standard with the frames. Joshua from the future here. This part is listed for $5 on the QuadQuestions website. Unfortunately, that still doesn't answer the question of whether it would be included with a new frame that you order today. It's possible that they're selling it for $5 because that's the only way to get one, and you just need to add $5 to the price of the frame if you want to order one. Or they could just be selling it on the website for people who already own the frame and want to add this part, or who maybe need a spare part, and I just don't know which that is. So for the time being, the question of whether this is included or not will go unanswered. It is not in the instruction manual, and the idea is that this is a video transmitter. It's basically your SMA connector fits here, so it can hold your video transmitter. It'll just set right in there. And it's supposed to go like this somewhere. Like the pictures that I've been sent show it something like this, okay? But there's several things I don't understand about this. Like that. The main thing I don't understand about this is, how are you supposed to do this without it making your am I supposed to cut these off? No, surely not. The standoffs? Well, am I supposed to, it's definitely underneath the camera plate. So are these just shorter, like 3mm shorter standoffs? And if so, where do I get those? or I could mount it on top, I suppose. And I would need longer screws, which, I mean, I have those. But so this, again, I'm not really sure. The manual needs to be updated to show how to install this, and it's really not obvious exactly how it's meant to be installed. And I'm not 100% sure I love it to begin with. So I really wish that instead of providing this, that the camera plate itself, or the base plate of the camera pod, had been updated to include this hole, like maybe have a little extension here with a hole in it or something, because this, again, it's not really up to the standards of the rest of the frame, and it's not really obvious how it's supposed to work. So there you go. That's your build, though. Now the frame is together, and all you got to do is put your electronics on it. But now you have a sense for how it goes together and you know what it's like. Okay? Hope that's helpful, and happy fun.